you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in 10 years. And that's my life story. If you take responsibility and you realize, okay, cool, I've got to get my arse into gear here, and I want to, do things correctly and go, you'll be surprised what you can accomplish.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Real Good Property Podcast by Neighbor Good. It's awesome to see you here today. We're a podcast designed for the next generation of property entrepreneurs. Today, we have an exciting guest with us, Marc Edwards, who was the CEO of Tower Property Fund and now is the co-CEO of Hangar 18. Super excited to have him. He has a 20-year track record in property. He started out at Spire, where he was a co-director and shareholder. He has run multiple businesses during his time. He is a local Cape Townian from Fish Hoek. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Real Good Property Podcast by Neighbor Good. It is awesome to see you all here again today. Today we have a special guest with us, someone that I've got to know over the last 3 or 4 years. He is a property man through and through. He's a family man. He's a Fish Hoek man, and he's a converted corporate to now. There's a social civilian who's also doing amazing things in the property space. Marc Edwards, welcome to the podcast. It is awesome to have you.
Shot, Murray. Oh, it's good to be here. Nice to see you.
Okay, let's start off at the beginning. Fish Hoek.
Fish Hoek till I die.
Yeah. You were born and bred in a sleepy little town. Is it a town?
It is a town. It's a big town. Yeah. Deep South.
Deep South. Did you learn your property skill set in Fish Hoek?
No, definitely not. No, my father was the headmaster of the high school there.
Okay.
So I had the awkward privilege of kind of being taught by my dad in standard 9 and 10, grade 11 and 12. And then when I kind of finished school, I went to go study at Cape Tech, just down the road here. But I actually got into property overseas. So in 98, some mates and I went over to Edinburgh, and we went and played hockey and coached hockey for a school there called George Watson's College, which is like, it's just like the Bishops of Edinburgh, but it's a co-ed school. It's a bit like Dead Poets Society kind of grounds. I watched School Ties last night. Remember that movie, School Ties?
Yes.
And it was just like that, like amazing. Anyway, I was there for 2 years, living the dream, and then went down to London and then needed to get a real job. And in London, I got a job for an estate agency in Earl's Court as an estate agent. And I was very bad. It's really bad. But then they switched me, because I was so bad, they switched me onto the new business side, try and get more stock onto the books. And that really took. And so I was able to kind of generate a lot of stock for the agents who could sell to sell. So I was never a salesman, but I was quite good at relationship building and stuff. And then came back to South Africa in 2002 and fell into property here on the property finance side, and then eventually on the operating side.
Did you think at school that property was in the back of your mind? I mean, what were you thinking about doing as a career?
I studied HR and I never finished it. Still to my mother's shock. I still haven't graduated. After 3 years, with one more year to go, I was like, stuff this. I needed to go overseas. My girlfriend and now wife at the time had gone overseas, and I was like, I better go chase her, although we went to different countries. But I studied HR because I thought I was led to believe, like in those days, you couldn't go on the internet and check about a career. So you would get guys coming to talk to you about, PR and HR and BCom and BSc and all this stuff. And I thought HR was human relation type stuff, and it's not at all. I mean, it's payroll, it's admin. You've got to be a very strong admin person, which I'm not, to do HR. And it was just like, it was the wrong fit from day one. And but I kind of fell into, via sport, going across to Edinburgh and then into London. Just really fell into property and then really enjoyed it. Like just really enjoyed the process, and then fell into commercial property when I got back to Cape Town. And then once that bug bit, it was over.
You're obviously a people's person.
Yeah.
So I feel like you've got a real skill in understanding humans, like having got to know you. Like if there's one thing I can see in like really successful CEOs or just entrepreneurs generally, it's their ability to understand human beings. And I've seen that in you, just watching and observing, and that's been awesome to see. I think maybe like the sport, like being a team player is also huge in entrepreneurship, and I think your understanding of that, and also being able to build a team as well is massive. And I know you've done that on a couple of occasions in the companies that you've built. Another interesting thing, and this is your podcast, not mine, is that we all think that successful people, and this is now the third time you've been CEO in your life, I would understand, or now co-CEO in your new venture, and we'll get to that soon, that when we are in our early 20s or mid 20s, we have this clear understanding of exactly what is ahead of us. But I was exactly the same. I didn't even think I was an entrepreneur, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to law school, and you studied HR, and I also got out of there as fast as I could get in. So if anyone's out there who doesn't really have a good understanding of what their career looks like in their early 20s, Mark and I definitely had the same feeling, because it's not always a clear crystal ball in the end, and I think it takes time to understand things.
Look, I mean, before you 25, your brain isn't even fully formed yet, and like I was definitely a late starter. I got married at 28, and for me that was the game changer, because I married like the most wonderful lady, but Kim is opposite to me. She's black and white. I'm all about living in the gray, and kind of recognizing those responsibilities quite late in life. It then gives you that boost that, okay, I need to get my act together. And for me, it was very much about trying to create things myself. So almost the first injection that I got of entrepreneurial idea was deep in Fish Hoek. There was never a Virgin Active in that case, in those days, Health and Racket Club. And I identified a site. We were managing the old Sun Valley Mall at the time. And I identified a site, and my colleague, Rodney Squire Howe, is one of the kind of doyens of the SA property industry. I, as a lighty, took the idea to him to say, like, hey, let's get a Virgin Active here. And then him and I went to go and see Virgin Active. And anyway, long story short, Checkers ended up buying Sun Valley Mall and then doing the Virgin Active deal themselves. But for me, it was the start of like, oh, wow, like you can actually sit around, create something, and if it's successful, you can make money out of it. But it was a process of creation. So I heard a quote a while ago, like you underestimate how little, you overestimate what you can do in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in 10 years. And that's my life story. Yeah. If I look back at Tower, which we listed in 2013, which we'll get to, we put that fund together in 6 months.
That is insane.
6 months. So all of a sudden you get these. As long as you take, like, you were saying, people listening, if you take responsibility and you realize, okay, cool, I've got to get my arse into gear, and I want to, do things correctly and go, you'll be surprised what you can accomplish. Yeah.
I think I was saying to Kim as well the other night, just about your story and about how cool it is and sort of the next chapter of your journey. But I know it's cliche saying this, but you've put in the work. You've spent 20 years in a career, like day in and day out. And obviously you're a talented guy who, like, you're going to do well either way. But to now be in the position that you're in, and I want to get to Hangar 18 later because I'm excited about it. And for you and the team, is because you've done the hard graft. So like, I don't know the exact saying, but it's luck is a big element, but you have to match luck with ability and to be there at the right time. And I think that's what you've done now. I want to go back to your joining Spire from the UK and those early days as a property broker, someone kicking about opportunities, because there's a lot of young people also listen to this and they're thinking about their property journey and what the next steps are for them. How important was that part of your career at Spire in hindsight?
Yeah, that was the game changer for me. I remember when I joined them, I was the regional manager of a sectional title business that they own called Intersect, which is still going. And that business is tough. You've got to go and manage body corporates. So you're in people's lounges every night listening to homeowners association or body corporate issues. And it was highly, highly stressful. And I remember once I was at a body corporate in Hout Bay. And I don't know, I was so stressed and so busy. I must have had like a panic attack or something. And I felt like completely dizzy and overwhelmed. I had to go lie on the couch and Kim had to come and drive through and fetch me at like 30 years old and drive me home. And we had to go fetch the car the next day. It was so embarrassing. But you look back and you realize, geez, we worked properly hard in our 30s, like really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
But Spire was the game changer. And it was luck that got me there, undoubtedly. But I formed a very good relationship with the two founders of the business and another guy, Keith. And the four of us are now equal shareholders. We own that business. And I remember saying to Keith, actually just passing him on the staircase one day, it was like after the first kind of few weeks, how's it going? And as this regional manager of Intersect, how's it going? And I said to him, I've got this feeling that I'll be here for life. And everything I've done since then has been out of there. I mean, this latest thing is not via them, but undoubtedly the relationships that I've formed in the industry and with the banks and stuff has been as a result of kind of that employment initially. So yeah, I owe those like everything.
What was your role there initially?
So initially I was regional manager of Intersect and we tried to build that business. And we built it. I mean, sectional title management, as you know, it's difficult because you're in the residential space. And it's difficult because you're in the management space. And management companies, the margins are so tiny. You don't earn money. You earn money on broking commission.
Yeah.
It's an entree into deals because, you're managing that many people. There's opportunities that flow out of that. But if I look back, a lot of the skills that I kind of developed over time, particularly public speaking, came from that. You'd have to constantly like sit with owners, maybe it's 100 people at an AGM and explain the year to them. And so you kind of into that fire. And so for me, that was a big, big thing. And then I went from Intersect, then Spire, which was the sister company, had a commercial property management business, which I always wanted to get into. And then I became the general manager and then the managing director of the Spire business.
Okay.
And then became a shareholder. Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
How long was that journey between Intersect when you joined and becoming MD? How long was that?
It was 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
3 years. 3 years in Intersect, from 2004 to 2007, and then maybe a year as a general manager, and then MD.
Have you ever had to have a Kip on the couch again since then when Kim picked you up there?
I've had a couple of moments, and it was, in fact, never since Intersect. And there's been stressful times before that. I think the times then were more money related.
Okay.
So I really sympathize and empathize with people who have money issues because to me, when I was just early married, we had no money.
Yeah.
Looking back now, it was such a fun time. Like, baked beans on toast for dinner. And that was such a joy. Like, looking back, you realize those were the real innocent days.
Yeah.
And everybody goes through that. But that stress to kind of put food on the table, I felt as the most real stress that I've felt kind of to date. Everything else, when you're working towards a goal or, a project or whatever it is, that stress, I didn't enjoy it, but you can deal with that stress.
Yeah. Did you have kids at that stage?
No.
Okay.
No. First,
was this you and Kim like going hard? Okay.
Yeah. First, I look back and how immature I was. Like, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. It was wild.
I know. And you think when you're 30 that you actually are a lot wiser than you are when you're 20. And then like you realize actually you still have so much to grow. I try and keep in the back of my mind how much growth and wisdom still needs to happen as
Yeah.
it plays out, and I think it just keeps you humble. You know,
Yeah.
in the end. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think there's ever a point where you're like, okay, I've arrived. You know,
No.
it's also a curse as an entrepreneur because you're like constantly looking for new ways to do things. So
Yeah.
you never like get to a point where you like look back and be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go sit and like drink coffees and read the paper, which
Yeah.
is basically my life's goal.
I
is
get,
to
I,
park
get,
off.
I get bored very easily. Yeah. And so always looking at, like, I get super excited if we're looking at a new property or it's a new deal and stuff like that. But I've realized, like, as soon as we get it, I need to pass it to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, they need to run the administration and stuff like that. I love the relationship building.
Yeah.
I love the idea of hunting for something and getting it. You know, that really, really excites me. Whereas some people don't like that part of it. They like to receive it and fix it. And, you know, so I just really enjoy, and maybe it comes from kind of not finishing HR, realizing like I've actually got to flip and do something here. And so you get that hunt gets quite exciting, you know?
Yeah, I think it's like a founder thing as well. I think you'll find a lot of commonality, I believe, with founders who are built to try and solve problems and create things. And then, you know, you've obviously been the CEO of a listed company, so it's not like you haven't done the other side of it, where you're basically managing, you know, yearly results, and it's a much bigger corporate animal. But I think when I've ever seen you and when your eyes light up, it is about like the creation of new things.
Definitely.
Which is ultimately where the value is, and then it becomes an operational thing, which is obviously also important, but it's those like beginning stages of finding a deal where you really make money or not.
Yeah.
Then there was a process from Spire to Tower.
Yeah.
And I'd love to understand that a little bit and how that all happened.
So we were managing, Spire was managing a whole bunch of private clients, commercial interests. So it was commercial property, shopping centers, office buildings, and industrial buildings. And we would collect the rent, pay the bills, you know, run the facilities management, do the ops, do the financials, etc. And then that business had broking as well. So you would do, you know, leasing, and I was running that business. And in 2012, or 11, we were the property managers for a company that had just listed called Synergy, and it did rural retail.
Yes.
It was the first guys, a guy called William Brooks, was the first guys that did real rural retail. They were taken over by Vukile, I think a few years later.
Okay.
But I was involved with them from a property management side, but from inception. So before they listed, they brought us on, and so I got very inspired. We were invited up to the listing at the JSE, and then William blew the kind of kudu horn to start the trade and all, like as you do. And geez, I got pumped. I was like, that had an impact on me tremendously. And then when we eventually got fired from Synergy, they took the management in-house. William had a very different idea to property management than traditional. And if I look back now, you know, we argued a lot about property management at the time, but I look back now, he had some good ideas, some really cool ideas.
Okay.
Anyway, so when we were fired, I looked at Synergy and I thought, and William was an ex-investment banker, very successful guy. And I thought, if investment bankers are listing property funds, maybe it's time that we list a property fund again. And Spire had previously listed a company called Paramount Property Fund.
Got you.
Which I wasn't involved in. So I said to Rod and Keith and Bruce, I said, look, I think the time is right for us to do something. And I wanted to start it. So I was like, it was my idea initially, and well, actually it was our idea together. And then they said, okay, cool, you be the CEO.
Yeah.
And at that stage, then we divided up shares and we said, okay, cool, you know, we'll all own X of this tower. And we brought in two colleagues from the outside. And then they gave me equal shares in Spire. So we kind of split the pot up equally. And in December 2012, we had a meeting and we were like, okay, cool, we're going to do this.
It's going to happen.
We listed on the 19th of July, 2013, 6 months later. And we didn't have a single property, obviously, in December 2012. So, I mean, it was completely through relationships that we managed to get it away. But that's how kind of Tower was born. It was born out of doing property management for years with Spire, managing synergy, realizing like, wow, this is another level, getting super inspired by William blowing the kudu horn.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to go from that December 2012 to listing in July 2013. I remember I went and stood outside the JSE and I like closed my eyes and I pictured myself blowing the kudu horn. And that was my like image that I kept in my mind until we listed. Yeah.
You think it's a different time now?
Definitely.
In terms of private, public, the choice between private and public. You know, I see Liberty has now
gone back
into,
yeah.
And we're seeing more and more of that. You know, what was driving it then and what's not driving it now?
So we were very lucky in that basically what we did was we went around to mainly entrepreneurs who had properties. And in 2013, if you remember, so the global financial crisis happened in 2008. South Africa never really experienced its global financial crisis at that time. And in 2013, that was the end of that quantitative easing period where the US Fed was buying bonds and money was super cheap. So interest rates were very, very low. And we thought like we had Java Capital as our corporate advisors. And in about March or April of 2013, they were like, "Oaks, we're going to fill our boots with money." I remember that phrase. And then in May 2013, they started to taper the quantitative easing, and interest rates moved up, and people started to get under pressure from the banks. Their loan to values went out of whack, and so we went to them and we said, "Okay, cool. Give us an option to buy your property for you, and we give you 50% cash, and 50% will be shares in our company, Tower. But the condition will be that we'll have to list the company, and then the deal becomes consummated." So we went to the banks who funded these guys who were getting super nervous about interest rates rising, and we said to the banks, "Look, you know, would you back us?" They did. Then we went to the entrepreneurs and we said to them, "Guys, you can put your properties into a fund. You can have a diversification of your risk." And so we got Cape Quarter that way, which was the kind of biggest property that went in initially. And we got a guy called Marc Edwards supported us in Joburg, and we got a whole bunch of properties there. But then the game changer was when Des de Beer of the Resilience stable, they kind of controlled Fortress and Capital at the time. They sold us some properties for paper. And that gave us the kind of critical mass we needed to list. So yeah, even in February of 2013, we didn't have a single property. By July, we had 28 properties all in.
Were you traveling a heck of a lot?
Yeah, I was doing a lot of kind of commuting to Joburg, mainly just to kind of speak to the banks. Investec backed us quite heavily, which was very cool of them because they were the funders of Cape Quarter. So yeah, looking back, geez, we should never have got it away, like never.
That's nice.
And we aggregated a portfolio for listing, which you could do in those days, and we had a Manco, so that's how we got paid. And Mancos have become now super unpopular, although they're very popular overseas. It's weird, but in South Africa they're not popular. We couldn't have done it in house because we couldn't have afforded to pay salaries and stuff like that. So we did it via a Manco for a fee. I think today the only listings that you couldn't aggregate properties today for a listing. You have to have your own money in the game, like real cash. And as you know, property is so expensive. It's so capital hungry. That to have that kind of ammo, you know, when Atterbury listed Attack, that was a massive story because these oaks had built this amazing portfolio with their own cash. And then they listed it. I think the market really respects and likes that idea.
Yes.
Like there was a crowd called Exemplar who brought a portfolio to listing a couple of years ago. I think they've done amazing. Like
Jason and Jonathan.
I think they've done. I've never met him, but I think they've done an amazing job. So like the market loves that stuff. I don't think the market would support entrepreneurs now trying to aggregate a portfolio for listing. But who knows? Maybe they would with the new Cape Town Stock Exchange and all that stuff. Looking for work. Yeah.
Anything you would have done differently?
Geez, so many things. Look, we made lots of mistakes along the way. But we did well by people. I mean, the share price when we listed was R8.75. It went up to R10.15 immediately, and then it just started to go down. I mean, we sold the company at R4.50 a share.
Got you.
I would have loved to sell the company at R10 a share, but that just wasn't the market. We always told the truth. We were always honest with people. We genuinely worked hard. We were listed for 9 years. The listed environment is extremely tough. And you mentioned Quentin earlier, Quentin Rossi. Theirs is quite a nice business because they own a large percentage of it. When you own a very small amount of shares and you're a management team effectively, you get pulled from pillar to post trying to please so many people. We had thousands of shareholders. We had some big ones. Alan Gray owned like 30% of us. If I could do it again, I would back myself more.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like just not, I mean, humbly listen to people's suggestions. But, once you make a decision, go with it and not be pulled from pillar to post. But I suppose that's a learning curve that everybody would go through. But listed is a tough space to be. I wouldn't want to do it again.
Yeah. I think it is tough, man. When you, I mean, I take my hat off to listed company CEOs and it's hard listening to so many opinions. People, everyone around you, people close to you, people not close to you, investors, shareholders, partners, employees, and everyone's got a view. And then you're at the top trying to steer the ship. And it's difficult because in the end, the accountability sits with you.
Yeah.
The success, the failures, everything basically. And I think it would have been tough. I mean, you couldn't have been like in your 40s by that stage. You were in your 30s, 38 years old. So probably close to one of the youngest CEOs, I would think, of a listed property company in the market. I mean, I take my hat off to you. I know it was also a reflection of the times and so many learnings. And I'm really excited to jump into the next chapter of your growth in part 2 of this episode. Thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it so much and look forward to having you next week.
Awesome.
Cheers, Mark.
Shot, Murray.